seems that you've sparked a lot of interest, Engineer Abdelamir, and you're keeping with the tradition of PDO of launching new dialogues, and I hope that this will be the start of many events that will discuss this very important topic as per what we just heard from Professor Yusra. And I have been told that our bios have been aired all the time, and in the interest of time, there will be no further introduction. So I'm going to go straight to the topic. And with the seating, and since you maybe need a breather, I'd start with Engineer Fathiya. It's CIDO, right? Your new organization, Chief Information and Digitalization Officer. That's a very interesting title in an oil company. And I'm very proud that PDO is taking the lead in this. So we will give you 30-second unpaid advertising to tell us a little bit about the role of this new organization.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm really honored to be part of this great initiative where we discuss a really very important topic. And it's a great group of people here that I think it gives us KM in action, where we share, we learn, and we exchange our ideas. CIDO, indeed, that was announced last year in January 2018 in PDO, the Chief Information and Digitalization Officer. It's a mouthful title, for sure, but actually for us was indeed very important and very transformational. PDO, as you know, has been always pioneer in making sure that we are always aligned with where the world is going, globally, internationally, regionally, even locally. We want to ensure that PDO always there in the lead and has the the contribution and the valuable fingerprints. So with the 4th Industrial Revolution taking the world where it is taking, it was really imperative to have that role assigned and defined in PDO. We've been always, of course, embracing technologies. I'm sure you had on the screens a touch of what PDO is doing on KM, but there is a whole host of many technological advancements across the board in PDO. However, we wanted to emphasize that 4IR is present in PDO. We are actually transforming ourselves to make sure that we are current, and in fact we are also trying to take at the national level everyone hands together with us. So indeed we are embarking on a very structured and hopefully a very successful transformation journey, and we will welcome everyone's support here. KM is important for IR, for everything that we will do in our transformation journey. So thank you, Dr. Amr, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And where do you start with an organization like PDO, with the vast history, the diverse knowledge that you've captured over the years? And in fact, I know there are lots of people from the oil and gas industry, but PDO and other operators in Oman operate in a uniquely complex environment that has diversity of topography, that has diversity in type of operations, diversity of output, processing, and so on. So where do you start? I mean, what's just been added to the complexity, the fact that PDO is now doing the transition to renewables by using more renewables inside. So where do you start when you attempt in this new role to capture that knowledge and utilize it?
KM, when it comes on knowledge management, is, as far as PDO is concerned, has been always on the radar. Back in 2011, we even took the extra step to create the framework that will regulate how we generate, how we consume, and how do we embed the knowledge. Now, as you know, being a main player in the oil and gas, we are a hub or a knowledge hub in many fronts. I mean, to give you an example, our enhanced oil recovery projects is actually not just a regional leader, but actually a global leader. many entities and organizations actually come for BDO as a hub to learn more about their successes in the enhanced oil recovery. There are many other examples. The Reeds Bed, Mir'a, which is our great solar project, and polymer projects. And last but not least, or maybe as a good example, is one of the most hydrocarbon complex and large project, which is Rababaru.
And the human development experience is the most important.
Indeed, in every project we do, in fact, in every function and every efforts that we invest in video, people become or are the backbone. So by doing all these pioneers, if you like, efforts, we are accumulating a lot of knowledge that can position Oman in a very unique way in the KM landscape. And in fact, my personal opinion is looking at the big picture. It is not just the industry that is offering Oman that opportunity. In fact, demographically, Oman has a great opportunity, and we can talk about that if we have time. And more important also is our culture and our openness, because it's very important in KM that you open your wings for people to share. I think Professor Yusra said about people tend to be very protective about the knowledge they create. So, and even more important that you are actually opening your wings to absorb others who are rooted very strongly in your identity and your own knowledge. So I think these are, for me, are the three dimensions that are prospects to offer Oman a unique, KM opportunity. So we, on the industry, on one end, we accumulate knowledge from what we do. And as I said, demographically, we are a very young nation, and by design, by definition, youth are more connecting, they are more absorbing to knowledge, and so on. So I think we are just here to fly, and as we said, in 2040, KM almost, I didn't do the statistics, as Professor maybe Yusra have had the chance to do, but indeed, without knowledge and knowledge management, 2040 we struggle to deliver what it is. So I think we cannot really overemphasize what KM can create in terms of opportunities to Oman.
Thank you very much, Tia. Professor Yusra, you answered my first 9 questions in that presentation. So, but I have more. So, what does that mean to society? You went all the way up in your pyramid to the wider society. Made me wonder whether that would actually bring disparity, further disparity. We have disparity of let's say, education, disparity of income, and so on. You add one more dimension, disparity of knowledge. How would that affect the way humans interact locally, globally? Before I get to more educational stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. I thought we agreed, no difficult questions. Generally, I actually think that what it would look like is a more collaborative society. I'm not sure it would lead to disparity, because as it is, education is one way. You have the educated and the not educated, and that is one differentiator. But I think if we were able to enact a more, or to instill a more knowledge-based society, we would be looking at institutions that are working more collaboratively together. So academia, industry, public, private, government would be really collaborating, because knowledge does not sit in academia. Knowledge doesn't sit with government. Knowledge does not sit with industry. Knowledge is a shared resource, and actually it's probably our only resource at the moment. So the more we can collaborate, the more we're likely to address some of those differences that you're actually talking about. So for me, it would be the catalyst for a collaborative, cooperative, understanding society, where we understand where knowledge is and how it can facilitate a better relationship amongst the different stakeholders.
Right, so what you're saying is a hopeful message, that right now disparity of income comes from the fact that we're not so willing to share our income with others. Disparity of education level, literacy level comes from the fact that it's very difficult without the knowledge sharing tools to actually share your information, knowledge, or qualification for that matter, or skills. But you're saying now, hopefully in the future, that task will become much more easier with the tools that will be available to pass on that knowledge.
I can share with you and with our lovely audience here a lived example of a very small example that I personally had the pleasure of being involved in, which is what is known as a KTP, a Knowledge Transfer Partnership. And basically it was the university working closely with a very small organization, small medium-sized organization, I think they only have about 60 people in it, to share academic knowledge with the institution on how to develop a knowledge management framework. But in return, the organization was sharing some of the challenges so that we in the university could do the research and write up the papers, and the catalyst, the person in the middle, is known as a knowledge transfer associate who worked very closely with myself as the academic and closely with the work-based mentor. So you can see a lovely kind of ecosystem developing there, where the government puts in a little bit of money, the university puts in a little bit of money, the organization puts in a little bit of money. There is a flow of knowledge that benefits everybody. We in the institution, in the university benefited, the company obviously benefited, the knowledge transfer associate benefited. So it's a win-win situation, and that's the kind of model that I'm trying to say. If you escalate it across institutions, then you can see that the benefits are realizable. But it's important to think of the small before you think of the large.
But obviously that's, if you like, an interim arrangement where you need the knowledge associate.
Correct.
At maturity, knowledge will be seamlessly shared.
Exactly, but it's the
and
transition.
Will become lonely places. People come to universities. I'm going to move on to Dr. Ramin. Dr. Ramin, Dr. Yusra put you, on the spot by highlighting the people issue. And people worry about talent leaving them because of not only the productivity and the talent, but also the fact that they leave with a lot of knowledge from the organization. How do you actually facilitate onboarding of new people that will quickly acquire that knowledge, be it tacit, implied, or explicit, and how do you actually deal with offboarding, onboarding, offboarding, in the case of the sensitivity and the competitive, manner of knowledge, the competitive nature of knowledge?
First of all, I would like to thank PDO for the invitation. In reality, Dr. Salim al-Ghazali was supposed to be here today, but he had a GCC delegation, and that's why
your sector is well represented. I see the CEO of Rido here, VPs from Montel, and you're here. The sector is very well represented.
First of all, I'm going to talk from a government perspective, because for the past 25 years, I've worked in government, so my experience goes back to that sector of society. I think as the government, we were used to, for many years, for many decades, not to really put any emphasis on knowledge management. And it was not like the private sector, for many reasons. One, that we didn't see the need. Second thing, we had a generation, my generation, not yours, Dr. My generation that went into a ministry and stayed there, or a government entity and stayed there until retirement. So knowledge was always there, plus the mentality was that government entities were sort of independent. They were very private about the knowledge that they had.
More importantly, they have no competition.
And they had no competition.
So they didn't need to worry about knowledge seeping out.
So what happened in the recent years was that, first of all, you had Generation Y get into the market, and that created a generation that doesn't stay in an organization for very long. So they started feeling that competition with the private sector and other government entities. So we have people, no matter how much we pay attention to them, 3 to 5 years, they're off to another organization. That's one thing that forced the government to really think about, or government entities. The other thing is that we started feeling this need for cooperation. So with the digitalization, I have to somehow get ITA into it, and technology, it was easier to share knowledge, and it was easier, if we wanted to progress in this field, we had to work together. But I think as government entities, there are several things that are barriers to whether keeping knowledge or onboarding people. One of the main things is that as government entities, we're, how can I put this? We are, we lack transparency to a large extent. And I think transparency, culture, and the environment that you create within a government entity has a big role. We're not, our environments are a lot less than people like PDO and Arman TED and Orido and the other organizations. So these cultures have to be changed. That's one of the challenges that we have. The second challenge is that there have to be champions within an organization. And unless the top management or the top of the organization really backs this, we're not gonna see the knowledge management culture. Because as Professor Yusra pointed out, people are the key. Technology and processes. I'll give you a small example of the challenge that if the people are not onboarded, as you mentioned, and people are not enrolled in the process, we can take e-transformation, for example. E-transformation as a plan was excellent, or is excellent, as something that is needed by the government, is well in plan. So we don't have an issue in planning. We don't have an issue. Our issue is in implementation. Yeah. I think تنفيذ اسم على مسمى. We need the تنفيذ part. We need the implementation part. And this is where you need champions within the organization, and you need to create that culture. There are other suggestions which I'll probably come to later.
Yeah, but تنفيذ or actually execution includes the experience part that makes the knowledge. You know, we move from data to information to knowledge. And knowledge is information plus experience. And that's where I think we fail in actually persistence and processes and now tools to actually facilitate the transfer of knowledge. If you remember, Dr. Amin and I were speaking incidentally at a conference on productivity, and it was felt that one of the major impediments to productivity for the Y generation, and we have many here, we have around 100 people, I think you're talking about 70% Y generation, was the fact that knowledge was so restricted in government organizations. You know, I remember I was calling for them to throw away the strictly confidential, the confidential and restricted stamps. Because you start with those, you start with regulation, then you move on, because all these tools do not actually work unless you do that. We'll come back to that, because you touched on an important issue. Back to Fathiya, and with this new role, and I guess knowledge management is part of your portfolio, but it's a corporate function, then how do you actually embed it into a large enterprise with diverse verticals like PDO? How do you actually embed knowledge, you know, elicitation of knowledge, acquisition of knowledge, and application of knowledge? How do you do that within an organization with the diversity and size of PDO?
Great question. I think the key element is that you have to regulate it and structure it so that it becomes part and parcel of clear roles and responsibility of
right,
everyone.
So you're sort of building on what you said. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. So reflecting on our experiences to date, we, over the 50 plus, or even more years of BDO, we've been accumulating lots of learning, lessons learned. I think Mohammed in his speech, he also gave an example that we have today about 7,000 lessons learned. The main challenge when we started really embarking on how to structure knowledge management so it yields the result. It used to yield the results, but we could see that the potential is multiple, that we're probably only creating that much result if we don't take the next steps. So what we've done there, Dr. Amr, is we looked back. Indeed, we were very good in creating, and we were very good in collecting and accumulating. Our weakest point in the chain was the embedment. We were embedding, but if we would have improved the way we embed, we could see the potential as value, whether it cost saving, cost avoidance, multiple values. So in 2011, 2012, we embarked on establishing what we called it the knowledge management framework in BDO. And indeed, the elements of that were the three key components: the people, the processes, and then the technologies. And we kept asking ourselves, what around the people, what are the governors that we need, the roles, the responsibility, but more importantly is how can we give the people the skills to be able to not just to create the knowledge, but even to absorb it, in fact, unlearn, and how can they do that actively. On the process, we have defined, we've picked the key processes like lessons learned processes, what we call it ROC in BDO, which is the retention of critical knowledge. And what does that mean is that we try, as our experts land in BDO, we try to define a process on how we make sure that the tacit experience and knowledge stays. So so this was around the processes. Now, when it comes to technologies, we knew that to enable all this, we need to have the right solutions and the right technologies to enable people to consume and embed knowledge more easier using technology solution. So we've defined that framework back in, I think by the time it was 2013 when the whole frame was clearly defined, the processes or the key focus processes, because obviously you can start with many processes, but it is key when you define your priorities is that you pick certain processes and you run with them. And we could see that lessons learned, especially from projects, was a key focus area in that implementation, if you like, roadmap. So indeed, after defining that framework, we have also decided that, as now digitalization say, you need to start small and then replicate big. Because otherwise, if you really aim to hit many areas, you are likely to just, distribute your resources very efficiently and then create very little value in many fronts. And therefore, we've scanned through BDO and our corporate projects. At the time, Rabab Harwi were just kicking off. Yibal Khof, of course, at a later stage, Kota. But we could see that if we really implement the framework in the project space, the value will be enormous. And that's what exactly happened. And I think maybe on the screen we could see we have managed to really achieve millions of savings as a result of embedding the process of knowledge management into projects. And what do I mean by that? Each project, before it starts, because in BDO we have predefined what we call it ORP, which is the project process as how we realize from ideation, from the project being an idea or a concept, until value realization, and of course operationalizing the project. At each gate of the project, the process had embedded what we call it a knowledge management gate. So the project team had to demonstrate to, of course, the project management that they have actually looked back at the projects that were done before. They picked up the lessons that are relevant. They looked at opportunity to embed them, and they embed them accordingly. So that was at the kickoff of the project, at the end of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and therefore it was part of the governance. What helped, of course, is indeed the tone from the top, the ownership that everyone, every management in BDO demonstrated in terms of ownership to knowledge management. It's important, and the missed opportunities if we don't apply that framework. Of course, we also, to drive that framework, indeed under my scope as CEDO, there is a dedicated KM team, which we call it a function, the KM function, who is really the driving force to ensure that the framework, if you like, goes into its different stages. So, today we've created massive value in corporate projects, and the team has already now, if you like, expanded the implementation to well engineering, to HSC, to process safety, process integrity, department, and so on. So yes, in a nutshell and in summary, you develop a framework, ensure that there is a tone from the top, ensure that there is a team who is driving it, and hopefully putting all these elements will give you the success that we as industry have, alhamdulillah, experienced. Of course, the roadmap is still, long, but I think we've made a very solid steps on the ground for sure.
Excellent. Doctor, Professor.
Can I just comment? I think absolutely amazing stuff that's been happening at PDO. And I'm going to put my business hat on, I'll take off the academic hat. From what I have seen of any organization that has implemented knowledge management, one of the critical factors for success, and I know PDO is doing this, is they've been able to put a monetary value on the benefits of knowledge management. It's not easy to do, but once you can see a pound sign or a dollar sign, it's so much easier to convince top management that this is a worthwhile initiative. And His Excellency is laughing because I think you can relate to what I'm saying here. Once you crack that nut, once you're able to capture the real value, tangible and monetary, then I think the realities and the scope of knowledge management becomes, you don't need to sell it anymore. It sells itself. And I think that is a very good starting and big point actually for many organizations to think, okay, how much have we actually saved? What cost efficiencies through the knowledge management gatekeeping have we actually achieved? And I know from speaking to colleagues at PDO, these have been huge. Right? It's not for me to say this, but these have been huge and really instrumental in driving knowledge management forward. So I just wanted to kind of just stop on that point because I do think it's valuable.
Thank you, that's very useful. Now, I'm sure some of the audience are already thinking, it's probably easier in an engineering-based company like PDO to track knowledge. You're all automated, you go back to your systems. But in service industries, and we have people from banking, telecoms, it becomes a little bit more difficult. I'm working with a client in Kuwait, and the idea is to pick a niche area that has, let's say, high readiness and high impact. And then when you start seeing the value, as Professor Yusra was saying, when people start seeing the value, that's when everybody else will call for it. Unfortunately for my client, the board had decided something else that wasn't highly ready. And when it's done, it would probably have a great visible impact in terms of media, but it would not have had, in my opinion, the solid dollar impact that would make the whole organization rally behind embedding and adopting knowledge management. But the rule of thumb is to go for high readiness, high impact, and then the wheel can start spinning. In case you're worried, the instructions from the organizers, and we have a dictator as an organizer, Munir al-Balushi, was that, and I'm an obedient subject. So the idea is that we go for 45 minutes panel conversation, and then we open the discussion for you for 45 minutes. So if you have burning questions, please keep them on the stove until we continue through the discussion here. Please, yes.
I think, again, looking at it from a government organization perspective, one of the issues that we have is not the actual processes. The processes are like machines, they're easy to implement. I think the biggest challenge that we face, and I think compared to other government organizations, we did take a few more steps, is the mindset. And getting the mindset of the organization and the culture ready, I think it's, you could have all the processes, you could have all the systems, you could have all the analysis, even the teams there. But if you don't work on the organization, at the grassroots of the organization, and get the mentality ready, whether it's sharing the knowledge or accepting the knowledge shared, I think this has to be emphasized as well.
I will cite Dave Ulrich's book on victory through organization rather than a hero leader or a hero employee, a talented employee. Thank you for that, Dr. Rami. For education, what does it mean for universities, colleges, schools, this whole KM business?
Yes, good question, Victor. I would say this, coming from education, but I think we play a critical role in raising awareness for our graduates, our outputs, if you like. I mean, Senator Fathiya mentioned a very important point. 48% of the population of Oman is under 24. So, I mean, there's your future workforce. The more we can talk to them about knowledge, readiness to accept new knowledge, willingness to think outside the box and not just regurgitate knowledge that was created 20 years ago. For me, though, I think the most critical point, and it's good to see we have so many people from the Research Council. Research is the way forward for knowledge management. It has to be the one and only, or the major contribution that universities can make to society and to developing knowledge management is genuine active research. And I know I keep saying this at every single opportunity, and I will repeat it today. I have a real issue with research that is taken, imported from overseas and superimposed on our local context. We have to develop our own research theories, models, frameworks that emerge from our issues. We cannot take leadership models that were developed for Japan or Germany and try and impose them in Oman. It's not going to work. So for us, research that is organic, that grows from within to address our own challenges is the way that we will be able to help people understand and absorb knowledge. There are other ways, obviously, teaching, etc., but the crux for me is research that is relevant to the industry, relevant to government, that really makes a difference, that contributes. So that I think is, in a nutshell.
I couldn't agree more. Research is very important, and indigenous research from within the country is also very important. But that leads me to a question that might go first to Dr. Ramin and maybe come back to you for an independent view. The academics sell themselves as independent people, so we'll come back to you on that. Dr. Ramin, in this case, is not very independent because often in a small nation like Oman, we look for an authorized, accepted party to lead any effort. So if we were to think, who would be in front when it comes to knowledge? We know PDO has taken the first step, but who do you think should be in front when it comes to knowledge management? We have IPA for the IT, we have TRA for the telecom, we have the universities, we have the Research Council, who is critical for this kind of work. So who would take in front? And don't worry, Dr. Salim is not around.
Twitter is. I think, I'm trying to be diplomatic. I think it's, again, if we want this thing to proceed, the problem is a lot of the time we used to think of knowledge management as information management. And we used to think of it as events, whereas knowledge management is a process. So it's never ending. So whatever PDO started, I think will continue for another 100 years because it's an ongoing process. The champion of this, I think whoever is the champion, and I'll That's not for
You need
me.
to cough it out. I won't let you go.
عندنا شيء حتى. I think whoever champions it should work at two levels. One is to work at the grassroots level, which if you're talking about government, for example, it should come from within the organizations. This is not something a central authority, whether it's a ministry or a minister or council of ministers, can take on board and say you have to implement it. You'll implement the process if the culture and the mentality hasn't changed. So this should be something that everybody, directly or indirectly, should be involved, because they're the only ones in each organization that can really work at the change of mindset of the people that work there. Now, as an authority, I think it should be an organization that really has central power. This is too big to give it, this is not a role that you give to the Ministry of Transport, or things to do with ITA that you would give, technology that you would give to ITA. I think this is something that should be given at the highest level. And they should be the champions, they should be the, if you like, enforcers. But within the organizations, there should also be an accompaniment for each organization to implement it. And I think unless, from my point of view, for any government entity, unless there's an enforcement centralized, let's say, for example, Council of Ministers, enforcing knowledge management at the government level, and the grassroots being accompanied by people like PDO, by others that have championed this to a large extent, to work together at the two levels, I don't think it will be implemented. It will go a certain number of steps, and it will go to a halt. So I'm just being realistic.
Yeah, that's quite logical, although it saved you from naming a specific organization, but it's still quite logical, because see, 20 years ago I was still working at SKU when I was approached by the cabinet ministers of Egypt. At the time, if you remember, the prime minister was Ahmed Nadif, who was previously the telecom minister. Just so happened when he was a telecom minister, we met at a conference where I was speaking. And then I was approached by them when he became the prime minister to perhaps work with them on a project for something they call decision support system at the, I don't know if you read about it, at the cabinet in Egypt, long time ago. And then that decision support system was to be, an AI-driven, knowledge-based systems that will help the cabinet of ministers make consistent decisions, especially in countries where you have a high turnover of ministers and shuffling of exactly. And I don't know where it went because I lost touch. I wasn't involved in the end because of the move to Mantel at the time, but I know they went ahead with the project, and Prime Minister Ahmed Nadif was adamant that they have that, and maybe your choice of cabinet is not only diplomatic, it's also the right one. What do you think, Dr. Hussain?
I'll be very frank with you. I think one of the quickest ways to kill any initiative is to form a committee to drive that initiative. Okay, so you have to be very careful in giving this kind of initiative. I completely agree with you. I think it should be at a very high level. I just don't agree with the terminology enforce. I think facilitate is a much more conducive way of, so facilitation would mean providing platforms, providing funding, providing training, but not enforcing at this stage. I think enforcing at this stage would end up in tick box initiatives. Yes, we've done it, we need to do it. Yes, here's the proof, we haven't really done it. So I think there's a transitional period where we have to facilitate, we have to bring knowledge management along with us to a level where it's embedded. Again, I make the comparison with quality management. I worry about quality management being enforced because then people just do it for the sake of getting the badge that says you've done it, rather rather than actually doing it because you really do it. So I think it's similar with knowledge management. I think it needs to be facilitated, supported, people need to feel the benefits of doing it, then it becomes enforced. So I think there's a stage.
I couldn't agree more. I think a facilitation is more important than ownership and the monopolization of the whole process of knowledge management. A higher power should facilitate, and especially from a regulation point of view, the dissemination of knowledge and the capturing of knowledge and processing of knowledge. But maybe monopolizing it would actually be counterproductive. I couldn't agree more. Please.
I have actually a comment on the championship, because while indeed you want to pick a grand champion that, if you like, almost become the owner, the overall owner of the whole initiative, you will definitely need multi-champion, if you like, representation, because obviously the endeavor and the effort is big, and also it always starts with the soft side of things. So if you create champions, they start really getting the soft readiness in organization zoomed into and created to become more of a KM oriented organization. The second comment is, I think, is building on what you have said, Dr. Amr, about choosing an area where there is a high impact. We can well, and good say that we want KM for Oman, but it's a huge, huge effort. So as they say, always, let's slice the elephant. And I think picking an area where we think is high value, but more importantly, if we, as digital, again, concept apply, if you win fast, if you really create a lot of value in this selected area, you almost got buy-in straight away without having to tackle multiple areas and face all the challenges and the resistance. And so, I think if we really pick on a focus area, ensure that we slice this whole huge effort and win fast, as the digitalization gurus call it, that will already give us a success story that can be replicated, not with a lot of ease, but certainly is going to be easier than trying to really address multiple areas at one time. Final one on the education institute and their role. I think as industry and being customers for graduates and for education output, I think the best that Education Institute can do is really to create for us knowledge creatures. What do I mean by that? Is people who really not necessarily want to do research in X, Y, Z, but they are in a consistent state of mind that they want to learn. They want to create knowledge and they want to absorb knowledge, so they don't reinvent the wheel. So it's not just about research X and the success and research Y. It is creating a sustainable mindset, and I think that's where, if the Education Institute help us creating that, I think that would be the grand success for industry like ourselves.
Knowledge creatures, that would be a new buzzword from PDO. I remember 22 years ago, when I was appointed a member of the Higher Education Council, I went to PDO and asked them, what kind of graduates do you want? I was still at Sultan Qaboos University. And they said, we wanted well-rounded engineers, and then we'll make of them what we need. And now we moved from well-rounded engineers to knowledge creatures who are not very rounded. Creatures are not very rounded. I have some kind of imagination of how they look like. They won't be very rounded, I know. Yeah. Now, one last question before we move. I'm sticking to the time, boss. The last question is to you. You sort of asked for it by the last comment. On slicing your own elephant at PDO. What would be the elephant stake for you to start and spring out of the 70,000 learnings, Engineer Muhammad? 70,000 learnings. Which one would you take out, like, congratulations on launching Innovatech, and which one would go out so that you can actually reap not only the benefits of efficiency internally, but allow you to get IP and intellectual property income from your ideas and spread the knowledge. What will be the focus?
Of course, you know, we have a lot of innovation that really can spin off. However, we're always keen to, if you like, mature it, harvest, you know, the benefits internally, but keep an instant eye on what can work for a larger benefit, whether at the national level, by benefiting other organizations within Oman, or even it start becoming a revenue stream for Oman, or you know, specifically for BDO shareholders. But I think we are in a constant, if you like, quest into what will make value for national landscape. Indeed, our core business is definitely oil and gas, and we have lots of innovation there. But that's not just it. As many of you know, we have grand success in lean. Lean as a practice is of course globally known, but the success that we have generated in implementing the lean within an oil and gas industry is now you know, widely known. In fact, we don't just have visitors from ministries and organizations. We have visitors from either regional players or even recently from international. So indeed, our focus is on where we can create and our IPs in our core business. But I think equally so, we are also having IP and innovations elsewhere. And we are in continuous collaboration. We try to walk the talk by ensuring that all our knowledge is you know, is widely available for Oman.
So we expect you to get into partnerships to take something out as a product rather than do it on your own. I think we
have a big we have a big commercialization arm that we started recently to indeed you know, looking at exactly like what you are asking about, Ramar, is what are the candidates for such things, being you know, tacit or explicit, like in the case of Nebras with Innovotech. But indeed, you know, the list is endless where we can really collaborate, and some people sometimes say we also BDO is a BDO business school. You know, mentioning offboarding and offboarding and people leave. We have good people who actually also went out to other organizations, and they actually proven to be great success stories. So again, it's not knowledge creatures, but we also graduate, you know, business
leaders,
people.
Business leaders, yeah.
So
they're a different kind of creature, right?
Yes.
They, you know, we counted a few years ago, actually, almost 10 years ago, there were 18 top men and women that left BDO to lead organizations, from ministers to CEOs and so on. So indeed, with that in mind, perhaps on the choices, Engineer Mohammed and Abdul Amir, of what you take to the next level of commercialization, I would say not to focus only on the core business learnings, but perhaps on the talent development learnings as well, that you can take out to benefit the wider society. I think it's time now.
Two seconds. Just to build on lean. I think lean knowledge management is far bigger and a bigger task than lean. But just to use it as an example, lean's been implemented in PDO, I don't know, for so many years. And I think the time that and they're a great help, they join forces with anybody and everybody in order to export their experiences. What they did was, government organizations didn't really take it on board over the past 12 years. What they did, they tried it with the Ministry of Environment, I think, and that created a bang among other organizations. And now there's about, I think, 11 government entities that are working with PDO in order to implement. So there was one success story at the level of government. We hear things about PDO from a government perspective, and that's PDO. They make money, they get oil, things that are not directly related to us. But when we saw it at Ministry of Environment level, everybody jumped on board. And now there's 11 entities working with that.
Excellent. So it's core business, organizational, and talent development. These may be, when we make choices, those are the ones that will be easily adopted by other organizations. We're 3 to 4 minutes above our time. I promise to try and give you those as well in your time. So we will start the open questions from the audience. Now you'll get the tough questions. Bismillah. تفضل دكتور.
What I understood now from the knowledge management is basically, as a definition, it is a creation of knowledge and sharing of that knowledge, and eventually trying to maybe utilization in the best way of the knowledge. However, to actually do this, you will need a certain criteria or elements to allow you to harvest in the knowledge which was created. And people have mentioned quite a number of things that you would require to adopt or utilize the knowledge. Basically, culture is one of them. Secondly, the processes that you need to maybe create to help you to implement certain initiatives. And thirdly is the infrastructure that you would require. I would like just to focus on one of them, which is the culture. And Dr. Ramin have spoken a lot about the government institutions, and I think a collaboration of the industry, academia, as well as government is very essential in taking this very important topic all the way to a national level. Now, with that, my question is, the culture, the environment, working environment, and the culture within the industry is a completely robust and performance-oriented culture, which is completely different from the government. Unfortunately, in the government institution, performance has a very, very low rating in terms of how people being evaluated. And that will have the environment or the culture within the government organization, in my mind, need to change. So it's toward the performance. It's not that people comes in 7:30 and I don't know whether you put your thumb, no, I don't know, I can't remember anymore.
Facial recognition.
Okay, facial recognition, and then you leave at 2:30 and people do not really understand what you do in between. And that is the main significant differences between what you see. We've been talking about PDO here, but I think that also applies to any industry. You take the banking sector or the telecommunication and so forth, which been contributing a lot to the base technology economy. And that's why, in my opinion, the government is quite behind. There's a lot need to be done in the government institution to harvest the knowledge created in the last 48 years, which probably will take us to the next phase.
You're absolutely right. I don't think two people would ever disagree on that. However, this isn't only specific to Oman or to the Gulf. This is a global phenomenon. Public sector tends to drag behind private sector in most parts of the world. So there's no way around that, if you like. There's a little bit of a reluctance to pick up speed. However, I think the current economic conditions will play a role in changing that and ensuring that people are, their contribution is measured and must be valued for them to remain in positions. I think the thing to bear in mind though here is culture is a very, very dangerous term. We talk about culture, but we forget that there is also the sub-cultures within institutions. So there is the organizational culture and the departmental climate, two very different things. So in PDO, you have what is maybe a PDO culture, but well engineering may be very different to one of the other departments. So the climates. So I think you have to come down to specific, to quite small, minor levels to understand how you can change it to grassroots. This isn't something that happens overnight. Multiple facets, multiple drivers, if you like, will have an effect on how quickly it changes, It tends to be, though, when money is short, people get, performances measured much more closely than when there is, an abundance of finances. So in my view, I think we're aware of it. The country is trying to address it, but this isn't something that is, specific to Oman. This is a general phenomenon.
Doctor, I think the answer here is a great response. The answer is more who would start, and then the pressure from peer pressure will come. But generally, I agree with Professor Yusra. We have pressure to succeed now in Oman as it's highest. And I think that will be a catalyst for change. But then you would normally have champions, like ROP, everybody agrees, have championed the e-services. You have Ministry of Oil and Gas, how do you call it, the regulatory kind of structure environment. And you have now the lean from the Ministry of Environment. So maybe we will need one or two champions that will then prove the concept and put pressure on their peers. Dr. Mohammed?
Engineer Fathiya, you said we need people with open wings. And I can claim I'm the only one in this room who can open wings, being asked for me. So please go ahead. Wait, very short two questions. One is who in PDO leading the KM? Is it CEDO? Is it HR? Because you mentioned KMT within CEDO. Is it for CEDO projects only or for the whole land? Second question is where do you consider yourself in the 5 levels of knowledge management presented by Dr. Yusra?
I knew that question was going.
With regards to the KM, in PDO we have this notion of functions, and a function usually on a specific domain. So we have, for example, a function IM, function for engineering, function for operations, and function for oil engineering. KM is also considered as a function, and that functions today is actually located within CEDO, within my organization, and it is also closely linked. I know we said IM is different from KM, and it is, but IM is the platform and a very key foundation for KM. I think Dr. Amr was talking earlier in his speech about moving from data, collection of facts that might not make a lot of insights, then into information, and then you grow it into knowledge. So in CEDO, actually IM and KM sits in one team as one function. So that's, I think, part one. In terms of where are we in the maturity ladder, because of the approach, of course, we've taken all the initial steps, the overarching steps in terms of defining the framework, the roles of organization, the governance. But the way we have approached it is, as I said, it's not horizontal across all the functions within PDO, but in fact it is selective on high value domains. So to answer your questions, we are actually at different maturity level in different areas. And to us, it's working very well because indeed, now that we almost have the number of millions that we managed to create as a saving in, for example, corporate projects, we are able with ease to actually replicate it and expand it to other functions in terms of people accepting the whole effort, if you like, yeah?
Yeah, but knowing how PDO works and indeed how Fathiya works, having been colleagues in Oman, it's not going to be a monopolistic ownership of the function if it's under CEDO, but it will be, if you like, an enabler, because Professor Yusra talked about the facilitation part, but because they own the enablement systems, which are the information systems, it has to be owned by an organization that is handling the information system.
Absolutely right. The model that we are working on is the small group that sits within centrally, which is the function, being in CEDO, is only orchestrating and facilitating, and if you like, defining the corporate rules and settings. But in each area, I mean, in oil engineering, for example, they actually have their own group that looks after the KM in their specific space. And so on for corporate projects, so on for finance, for process integrity that I've talked about earlier on, and so on, and the list goes on. So indeed, it's a federated model with one centralized body that makes sure that the overall value is well orchestrated, facilitated, and everyone speaks the same language. Yeah. So we have the same concept, the same rules, the same framework, but everyone kind of drive their own implementation with, of course, assistance
You need
from
that
the
digital
central.
core. You need that digital core that houses the information which you work with the clients to turn into knowledge.
Having spent a lot of money generating and creating that knowledge, I think it's only fair that I maximize and sweat it to the last cent to get the value out of it. So how do we protect that power, yet at the same time create what we put on the board, a knowledge-based economy, so it doesn't become a socialist sharing of knowledge, which is really helping nobody, because no one will ever create knowledge if it is freely shared. So that's the first part. And the second one is probably related to technology. How do we protect ourselves from the infection of the wrong knowledge? Because I can infect you with the wrong knowledge to be able to excel somewhere else, where you're probably spinning your head doing something else with the knowledge so how do you protect ourselves from that wrong knowledge sharing?
Lots of companies have worked or tried to figure an answer to that. Obviously, there's no strict answer. If there was, nobody would be worrying about it. One of the mechanisms for dealing with that is for knowledge management and knowledge sharing in particular. At this point, I want to specify it's not knowledge management, but knowledge sharing in particular to be rewarded. So through PDPR, through performance appraisal, through promotion, it has to be seen as a valuable contribution that you as an individual make to the organization. So, and it's captured and it's monetized. That is probably the shortest way of encouraging people to share. Now, there is then the comparison of what's the value of this knowledge I'm sharing, and what's the value of the promotion you're going to give me or the bonus you're going to give me, and that's a completely different question. So there are multiple ways of dealing with it. There is also something around developing a culture where people who do not mentor others, share with others, are not ostracized, but are not seen as valuable employees, or so they're not recognized. So trying to ensure that you celebrate people who share knowledge, effectively share knowledge. I think the thing to bear in mind, which we haven't really touched on, and apologies if I'm taking this off course a little, but we have to be careful that knowledge isn't easily shared. It's a time-consuming process. And I'll give you the most basic example with riding a bike. We can all ride a bike, but can I tell you how to ride a bike and not fall off? Yeah, that's the issue. If it's just captured knowledge, explicit knowledge, that's very easy to share. It's the tacit knowledge that is difficult. Yeah, and that's where you have to invest a lot of time, and that's where your question is absolutely right, Your Excellency. The amount of time I have to invest in sharing my knowledge of the 3 years now in managing a university may not be as valuable as getting on with the job, and that's the crux. So it's a very valid point. It's something that is dependent on the culture, the way performance is managed within an institution, the way promotions are managed, and the way individuals are treated based on their mentoring skills and their abilities. So it's a complex one, but yeah, thank you very much. There's another part to that question.
Yeah, maybe may I elaborate, because that's a very deep first question. I want to elaborate, at least from a consultant point of view, now that Dr. Abdullah blew my cover. The way our organization, which is very advanced, our US partner in knowledge management, are looking at it, is a knowledge index. So to cover the first part, which is the employee, we now know the employees, that this guy has a master's, a BS, and a PhD, but we can also have a knowledge index against this individual. And that index is calculated through AI-based inquiry systems that basically test your knowledge to extract illicit knowledge that you would not normally cough out, and will allow it to be explicitly measured through some kind of psychometric combination of knowledge bases. Now that's one way, but when it comes to commercializing knowledge, the way you want to drive it as a software engineer yourself and an IT specialist, you know that the software engineers suffered in the beginning with the IP. How do they return their IP? And it was originally, you have to pay the whole IP upfront in order to use it. And then we moved all the way to SaaS, as a software as a service. I think this is what will happen in the knowledge industry. Our partners back in Utah are working with us. They're coming actually next week. I think you're on the invitation list on the 4th. We're working now on a model that allows you to use a tool like a bike. So my knowledge of how to ride a bike, I'm just using your analogy one. I have a different, simpler example, but I'll use this analogy of riding a bike. I know how to ride a bike, but then my knowledge of riding a bike can be programmed into a bike. And that bike takes you through teaching you how to ride a bike. Now it's normally the older brother or the next door neighbor who helps you. So the bike itself will take my implicit knowledge and put it in the programming and the mechanics of the bike to take me through all the learning journey, including the falling. It will allow me to fall a few times until I learn and I get it right. This is the vision that we're working with, and we're actually on the day, on the 4th, if you would grace the occasion and attend, we're going to announce Sears, which is the one system that will allow that.
Can I just build on that, Sa'atik? I think KM does not suggest a free flow of information that is, in an IP less, if I can call it so, world. Because indeed, being realistic, no one will let go of an IP that is giving him, giving the organization a competitive advantage. But I think there are levels of how knowledge is shared. That's number one. But more importantly, if we reflect on South Korea experience, they are by the World Bank recognized as one of the leading knowledge-based economies. I think in the 50s or 60s, their GDP per capita was about $3,000. Today it is $31,000, and according to the World Bank report, it's all attributed to knowledge. But what is the definition of knowledge? Is actually being able to create human beings, I'll go back to that they are innovative, they are able to consume knowledge where it is available, rightly available, shareable. Of course, the world is going more into more sharing, but of course with even respecting indeed the point that you bring in, that it is not really a free sharing. Where it makes sense, of course, all the world is embracing sharing, donating knowledge, but of course there are going to be always components that this is my competitive advantage, I cannot let go. So I think the bottom line is really creating people, and that's where the most important bubble, who are able to generate that knowledge via innovation and being able to become entrepreneurship that make that knowledge bring money and bring value. And I think reflecting on South Korea experience, that's where made the difference for them as economy based. So just to add a bit of.
There are lots of things that have taken away Dr. Yusra. Definitely you've been pointing at least fingers to me, but I know what you mean. Definitely the PhD programs is time for it, and I think we will be pushing PhD programs in all higher education institutions. I believe this is the way of advancing knowledge in this country, and without such programs in different higher education institutions, I think we are not going to at least put our fingerprints in the knowledge economy. So thank you again for this, and it was my honor to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
His Excellency asked a second part of his question.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry,
Nobody
my
answered.
apologies, my fault.
The security side, I think looking at it socially and technical-wise. Socially, I think if the success and failure stories that we read about in knowledge management, if the knowledge is centrally inputted, then you have that risk of
single point of failure.
One set of mind, whether right or wrong, entering. But if it's done right, it's multiple channels that are filtered through. And second thing, because it's an action, reflection, consultation, it's actually a cycle. It's not just getting information. Even if wrong information gets put in, it can be reflected upon, consulted upon, and action next time would correct that thing. Second thing, I think with artificial intelligence, there are a lot of programs now that would actually be teaching itself along a certain path, which is right, and filtering that information in knowledge management. So AI can also help us.
Yeah, so it's dynamic, and it's obviously distributed and dynamic. It's an elusive target, yet it has to be protected. And with that, I would like, on your behalf, to thank the panelists. Thank you very much, Fathiya. Thank you very much, Dr. Yusra and Dr. Ramin. And I want to once again thank BDO for organizing such an event. And thank you for being here.